Day event is senior Rachel Pollinger. So Rachel's first experience at Bowdoin back in 2011 was hanging out with a bunch of budding scientists and mathematicians. She was part of the Bowdoin Science Experience, an on-campus orientation program for first years who are from groups that have been underrepresented in the sciences, and they come to Bowdoin to get a little early introduction to the science program here at the college. To this day, Rachel says some of their best experiences and her best memories come from the Bowdoin Science Experience, and students from those days are her best friends. And now that she's a successful math student, her majors are math and education, she's a mentor in that program. She likes to stay connected to the program that welcomed her to Bowdoin and pass that along. She also helps out her peers in other ways. She's a study group leader for the quantitative reasoning program, and she's been the marketing director for the Mask and Gown Bowdoin Students Theater Group. Asked about her favorite academic experience here, Rachel said she would return to sophomore spring and retake a course called Educating All Students. All the Bowdoin students in the class shadowed middle school students to see how their educational theories played out in a real classroom. Although she learned a lot about a particular student, Rachel said she felt that at the end of the semester, there was still much to learn from her young subject. She plans to return in a few years to Bowdoin to earn her teaching Bowdoin certification from the Bowdoin Teacher Scholars Program and to become a math teacher. But before she does that, Rachel will be working as an investment associate with the Boston firm Cambridge Associates. She's graduating early and starting her new job in January, but she tells me she will be back to graduate with me. We wish her the best of luck in her career. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Pollinger.
Yeah! Woo! Rachel!
Thank you very much, President Mills. Thank you all for being here to celebrate the academic achievement of Bowdoin students. I would also like to thank the Internal Student Fellowships Committee for selecting me to speak before you all today, in addition to all of those involved in making Sarah and James Bowdoin Day possible. Lastly, I'd like to thank my parents, as well as my sister Ginny, for continuing to both support and inspire me. I'd like to begin with a story. I find this to be much more informative than simply dictating what I'd like to discuss today. As many of my professors have told me, show and don't tell in your writing. My story takes place this past summer in Washington, D.C. I spent 8 weeks living in the city, interning for a financial consulting company. My most powerful learning experience did not happen inside the office building, but rather in a metro station plaza fairly early one Saturday morning. I had plans to visit a museum, but arrived a bit early and decided to sit in the empty plaza and read. About 5 minutes later, a security guard approached, commenting on how it was a nice morning to be outside reading. I nodded, fully expecting this to be our only interaction. I'm very happy to say that I was wrong. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, we proceeded to have one of the most thought-provoking conversations I've ever had. I told him about my sister, who is out in California pursuing a career in screen acting, and he relayed the story of his son, currently an engineer. I told him about my studies at Bowdoin as a math and education major. He then commented on his interest in math, describing it as the music of the universe. As we continued to get further into discussion about various aspects of math and physics, he paused to direct a family to the National Mall. When he turned back to me, he asked, "What do you think the universe looks like?" I paused, taken aback by the gravity of his question, no pun intended. When I didn't respond, he rephrased it, inquiring what my conception of the universe was. Needless to say, I loved this conversation. I wandered through the National Museum of American History, less concerned with the intricacies of Julia Child's kitchen, and more enthralled with thinking about an image of the universe, something so much bigger than I am, in both senses of the word, something that I'll never know completely and fully. Looking back at my time at Bowdoin, I find that I've become much more accepting of open-ended, thought-provoking questions. Questions that don't have an answer, or at least a clear answer. Questions that you find yourself thinking about when you go to sleep, or when you take a long car ride. I'm glad there's so many of these types of questions because, Otherwise, I think education and life in general would be quite shallow. I think my parents could attest to my inquisitive nature. I love watching baseball, but I often feel like I am more interested in past games and players or hypothetical scenarios than the actual game playing out before me. Every time I'm watching the Red Sox with them, I ask questions such as, if you had to pick one player for each position, who would you choose to compose your team? Or, is the triple play or an inside-the-park home run more likely? I frequently look up lists of the most improbable baseball plays. While not necessarily completely open-ended, the questions still allow me to see them think. Something about having people give time and genuine thought towards something I've developed is satisfying. It's like when you recommend a movie to a friend and then internally take credit when they enjoy it, even though you had nothing to do with the actual production of the movie. I also think I ask a lot of questions because it gets someone else to speak instead of myself. As a self-proclaimed introvert, I like to let other people do the talking. Open-ended questions that will take them a long time to work through and discuss is a subtle way to get to know somebody really well without saying more than a few words. I think that DC security guard probably knows me better than a lot of people I've known for many years. And it's simply because he asks the right questions. Not factual questions about who I am, but questions that really got at how I think and how I interpret the world around me. In the past, when people asked why math was my favorite subject, I used to say that it was because everything has one right answer. I have since altered my thinking on this topic. I like to think of math as a discipline inherently about asking questions. For example, why is it that an even number added to an even number is always even? Math at Bowdoin challenges me to think about a problem multiple ways, and there are certainly questions that remain unanswered. In fact, in my introductory analysis class last spring, Professor Pietraho used to put currently unsolved problems on homework sets. He said that if we solved any of them, we would automatically get an A in the course. I'm fairly certain no one was successful in this endeavor. In my philosophy of education class last semester, Professor Santoro would write questions on the board to start every day. I frequently came out of class with no answers, but a plethora of new questions. These were the sorts of questions where you could find yourself sitting in the dining hall for hours, talking about one word or one idea. What does it really mean to be emancipated or to understand something? The intellectual conversations I've had outside of class are one of my favorite parts of going to a liberal arts college. Returning to the security guard, I wonder if he has those types of conversations often. I hope he does, because when you are asked a question you've never thought about before, it changes your whole day. Suddenly, you've got something bigger than yourself to think about, and you have to accept that that is all you can really do. Think. You can't say anything with certainty, and in a way, that's sort of comforting. I would challenge everyone to ask the question today. Give other people food for thought that will take them away from their daily life, if only for a moment. Maybe you can ponder a little bit yourself as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I want to thank Professor Lozier and our student musicians, Kelvin and